Welcome into another edition of New Track Record. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you this week, recapping the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. Kyle Kirkwood getting his first career pole in IndyCar and his first career win in IndyCar over the weekend for Andretti Autosport. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Mr. Hatch. Yes, and we're going to talk to every single one of those 192,000 people that were in attendance over the weekend to get their thoughts on the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach.
And especially their thoughts on the key takeaways of the weekend, right?
Of course.
That being Pato versus Dixon and Canapino, Ilott, and Juncos.
All sorts of goodness
nonsense
in there.
Yeah.
Nonsense is a good word for it.
Nonsense is how I would describe it. So we'll do our three takeaways, plus the Indy 500 field is set as we record just ahead of the open test. It's Wednesday, April 19th here in the morning in the States. Open test coming up April 20th and 21st, so we think we know our Indy 500 field. Plus, we'll get to a bit later on a look at potential future venues for IndyCar. A lot of interesting nuggets coming out by an interview from Mark
nuggets.
Miles. Yes, so we'll get to all that, but first, our recap of the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. Kyle Kirkwood, again, getting his first career win. Our three takeaways, and I think this is obvious. The first takeaway is just Kyle Kirkwood, right? A guy who went from the Texas race a couple of weeks ago, getting threats on social media after his pit collision with Alexander Rossi and that whole mess. You move on, you go to Long Beach, which is a track that Andretti Autosport is usually really strong at. We knew going in that they'd be contenders, and I think, did I pick Herta or Rossi? I think I picked Rossi. Who did you pick last week?
No, I picked Rossi.
You picked Rossi?
Yeah.
Okay.
Find your own guy.
I think I picked Herta then. So either way,
Yes.
we had good picks going in, but I don't think any of us would have expected this from Kyle Kirkwood.
Not at all.
Not only winning the pole, so he's won a pole at every step of the road to Indy, but also winning a race, his first career win. And look, between the team performance as a whole, and we can get to that later on if you want, but Kyle Kirkwood himself, I mean, this was the weekend he desperately needed an IndyCar, and to have it happen and get that win before the month of May, it's got to be a huge relief for him. His confidence, I never felt like his confidence wavered, and a lot of people were saying that because he's just a really talented guy, but you don't have to hear any concern from people. I get it. There will be ups and downs, as there always are for drivers, but he finally has that first win. I think people can move forward and understand why Andretti locked him up long-term back in 21.
Well, for the way he drove the final stint and not putting a wheel wrong, with Grosjean putting some pressure on him, he wasn't right behind him, but consistently about a second behind, and then Marcus Ericsson charging as well. One misstep, and he was going to lose that race. And for his career up to this past weekend, it's been a bunch of missteps by Kyle Kirkwood on track. Some of them not of his doing, but some of them were his doing. And to be able to close out that race in the manner that he did was nothing short of impressive. And he even said, I think even before the race in an interview, about his success on the road to Indy and how that had yet to translate to IndyCar. He said, basically, I was used to starting up front or towards the front, and I haven't been able to start at the front. And you took blame for that too, and not being able to qualify well. But now that he was up front, I think it was his comfort zone because he had been up there so many times in the road to Indy. And that's going to be the thing for Kyle Kirkwood going forward, is if he can be towards the front, he's going to be a threat. But can he consistently move his way through the field without putting a wheel wrong? And that's going to be the next question, I think, for Kyle Kirkwood. But congratulations to him. First win, first pole, and at a track that Andretti has had a lot of success at recently. He becomes the newest first-time winner in the series.
And this is a guy who, looking at the list, he was a contender, right? But I don't think we would have expected it to be him. I think we would have guessed Lundgaard or Grosjean or even Callum Ilott
to be that first winner
before Kirkwood.
I would agree with probably Grosjean and maybe Lundgaard, although RLL hasn't been there to even make me think that they can win a race at this point. But no, the way Kyle Kirkwood has been able to, at least for a weekend, show his potential and what he could be in IndyCar was nothing short of impressive. Now, the consistency thing comes in. Can he be consistent and be a competitor week in and week out? That's the next question for him. But a dominant drive, I felt, particularly over that final stint. Congratulations to Kyle Kirkwood and Andretti, which needed some good vibes after the first two races of the season with a multitude of their drivers. And
a great weekend for Andretti, top to bottom, going 1, 2, 4. Devlin DeFrancesco, unfortunately, in qualifying, his team let him down with not having enough fuel. Otherwise, he probably would have advanced to the top 12 as well over the weekend at Long Beach. All right, what's your first takeaway?
My first takeaway, I guess we can talk about Scott Dixon and Scott Dixon's against Pato O'Ward, I think. And I think there's two large incidents to talk about. First, the incident on track, and the start is, I guess, the first one, and then the incident on track would be the second. I guess, and this was brought up in the mailbag this week with Marshall Pruitt, is it's just not a good start finish line conducive to getting lined up. You're coming out of the hairpin and immediately basically going in, and basically you're allowed to accelerate once you see the green. And so if you're coming out of the hairpin in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and the green is waving for the field, you don't have to brake. You're just going right on the accelerator. That's what Scott Dixon was whining about. And I just don't think it was anybody's fault. It's just, unfortunately, that's just the way the track is laid out and where the start finish line is at Long Beach.
And for Dixon, I mean, this is a wild stretch for him. He failed to complete every lap for the first time in 23 races. That goes back to Gateway in 2021. And then it's the worst finish of his entire career, 27th place, outside of the Indy 500 in 2014 and 2017. Of course, 2017, the infamous one-car airborne call by Nick Yeoman of IndyCar Radio. Yeah. So, look, if you move the start line, which I get sounds easy to do, you have ticket holders who have had tickets, in stands across from the start line for many, many years. You just can't simply do it. I think the better thing to do was just change the start procedure, being that, the leader kind of controls the start. Maybe just delay the start a little more and get the field packed up, because unfortunately it is what it is with the hairpin, right? And that was a bad start. Unfortunately, that's the way it is every year at Long Beach, though. It's not a change from anything. No, it just is noticeable.
And it's a great point, because with you saying about the fans and how you can't really push the start finish line down a little bit, because those people have had those tickets for years. So it's just, there's no perfect circuit out there. Unfortunately, probably the start finish line a little bit early, but whatever. It's not that crucial of a deal. I mean, Scott Dixon didn't win or lose that race based on losing a couple of positions on the start.
No. Now, as far as the contact with Pato O'Ward, I don't think Pato has anything to apologize for. Their front wheels banged. It's not like,
well, I think it was a late move.
It was a late move, but he pulled it off.
I think it was a late move, probably, and I think maybe it shows the impatience that we're seeing. Overall, it was a weekend that the first two weekends we saw the potential of Pato O'Ward to be, I think right now he's the most popular driver in IndyCar.
Yes, I would agree.
Now, maybe not the most popular driver in the United States, but if you did worldwide, particularly in the Americas, and did a poll, I think Pato O'Ward is that guy. But he made a couple moves that were impatient. That was one of them. And then he tried again and got spun and ended up finishing mid-pack, 17th. So that's the impatience of Pato O'Ward that we sometimes see, and it bit Scott Dixon. But to me, I don't think refreshing is not the right word, but it was nice to see a weekend where not everything went Scott Dixon's way. Because it feels like that happens all the time. And it's just funny from what it sounded like, Emma Dixon expressing her opinions, is things have gone so right so many times for Scott Dixon on track that when it doesn't, it's a big deal when it shouldn't be. It's just the law of averages. Eventually things even out, right?
Here's the thing too. IndyCar is clearly given the drivers a, just let them race kind of mentality as far as how they consider incidents, and drivers either need to move on and race that way. And we heard some comments. I even think Dixon like that's how it's going to be
if it's not going to be called.
That is how it is. That's how they called it last season. I mean, you look at Mid Ohio and the meltdown for Andretti Autosport. It's like, this is how they officiate races now. So either adapt or complain, knowing that you're not going to be racing the same way that everyone else is out there.
It has to be a blatant mistake by a driver to get any type of penalty. If it's beating and banging and making a late move and making it stick and knocking a guy out of the way, and then the series is going to let it go. That's just how it's going to be. And I think that's pretty clear, to your point, that is how it is. And drivers that still don't understand that, I guess that's on them. But no, these cars are robust for their design. They're capable of taking some punishment and some knocking and beating and banging. And we're not talking NASCAR level, but of course, if you want to stick a tire in there and knock body work and try to pull a move off, then by all means, the series will say, go ahead and do it. Just don't wreck the guy. And Pato O'Ward, it was a late move, but he didn't wreck Scott Dixon.
Yeah, I think, look, he made the move. It's not like he punted him in the corner.
Yeah,
because his front tire was, not even at the side pot. I mean, the front wheel's banged. I guess to me, it's a racing deal. I don't have a problem with it. I think that's how they officiate things. And so if they're going to call it that way, you got to race that way. And I don't think Dixon races that way. So I think he's got to adjust.
I would agree. And when you're in traffic, when you're back in the field, you're going to deal with stuff like that. Same with Pato, but it's just kind of how it is. And I saw no problem with it. But what's your second take?
Second takeaway. Big weekend for Honda. I think this could easily fly under the radar. Honda swept not only the podium, but the top 5. So they win the pole. They sweep the top 5 of the race. Just a dominant performance by Honda over the weekend. And as I was reading through some numbers the other day, I saw online, Honda versus Chevy since 2012. Look, there's one thing that matters to Honda.
500.
The 500. And they lead that category 7-4 over Chevy. And outside of the 500, having any of the Honda events, won by a Honda driver, obviously a big deal. And to win Long Beach, that basically a stone's throw from where HBD is located in Southern California, a really big deal. A dominant weekend by Honda. We thought that Pato O'Ward would kind of be that guy all weekend. As he led the first couple practice sessions. Never really came to be. But look, Honda doesn't care about the season-long manufacturers battle, but a weekend like this puts them in excellent position. But it all comes down to Indy, as it usually does every year.
It does. I think this was more definitely a lot of it was helped for Honda with the fact that this is arguably Andretti's best track.
Yes.
And finishing 1, 2, and 4.
And then Ganassi being the other team.
Yeah, with Ericsson and Palou at 3rd and 5th, right? So I think that more than Honda is what drove this team in terms of the weekend was those 2 squads. And conversely, Penske really kind of not having it. But impressive weekend for Honda. We'll see if it can continue into Barber and then the month of May. But I put more onus on those 2 teams doing tremendously well over the weekend.
And for Penske, they did not make a Fast 6. That goes back quite some time as far as the last time they didn't have a single car in the Fast 6. So it just kind of goes to show you how different, this felt different in the sense that Penske wasn't a factor in the race outside of Newgarden and then getting the strategy wrong. And I'm sure we'll probably get to that eventually. But it just shows you how tough it is to be competitive, to be up front as far as the stack goes. No Team Penske in the Firestone Fast 6 as they started 8th, 9th, and 13th. The last time they failed to get at least one car in the Fast 6 was Portland in 2021. So it'd been a while.
Been a minute. And that'll be my second point with Joseph Newgarden. Like, why did they go on an alternate strategy to start the race than everybody else? I mean, they started 8th. It wasn't like they started 19th and they needed to try something. Why did they start? Because it threw everything off for Joseph Newgarden down the stretch. And then he's the only one that's saving maximum fuel at the end and basically getting past. Like, I don't understand. We talk so much about Penske getting it right all the time with strategy. Is they got everything wrong with Joseph Newgarden on Sunday. And I know some of it has to do with cautions when the way they don't come out, but they just set him up for failure for the jump with the tire strategy.
And that's after he was accused of jumping the start by a lot of drivers. There was no penalty
given. He made 4 spots to start?
So he was already in the mix right into the first corner. But between pitting too early because he was just out front and not saving enough fuel, whereas Kirkwood was just biding his time, doing what he had to do. And I think that's the thing, it's just having the patience. And we think of Scott Dixon as the fuel save master, but for Kyle Kirkwood to do what he had to do to hit the target, to hit the number, was very impressive, and to be patient. And look, just the tire strategy was completely wrong for Newgarden. Completely botched it. I get it. He was an
So they
eighth.
started on primaries?
Yes.
Yeah, it just made no sense.
So it's get rid of the alternates as fast as you can. Go on primaries. That was the clear strategy that won this race. And Penske, look, they won the championship last year. Like, there's nothing wrong with the team. However, I will be very curious to see how the month of May goes, because to go, 4 years, this year included, it seems like forever. It seems like a lifetime to not be competitive at Indy, and that's what we could be embarking upon here.
We very well could, and we'll see what happens in May with that. I found it just so bizarre that Joseph Newgarden was the only one seemingly really conserving fuel at the end, and he said, what did he say over the radio? This is dumb, as he's getting past, and Tim Cindric is like, well, it's better than finishing 18th, and my thing would have been back at him. Like, it's on you if I finish 18th. Like, well, this isn't on me.
He had a race-winning car.
Yeah, but this was your strategy or the team strategy.
He had no shot to win.
But it's I don't know. It had to be frustrating for Joseph Newgarden with how that race went. I just didn't understand the alternate strategy when you were still starting in the top 10. I know it can be difficult at Long Beach to pass, but it wasn't like you were starting 22nd.
And I think I get it, the winner won from pole, but it's not like we haven't seen guys come from mid-pack in recent years to win. So there's an opportunity here, and it just depends on how that early caution falls, and that at least changed the race a little bit, but not enough to completely flip the script as far as the strategy goes for the guys up front.
I would totally agree. And it burned Joseph Newgarden down the stretch. And it even burned the show in the sense that Grosjean, so much was being made about him having all this push to pass. He couldn't use it because he needed to make sure he got to the end and he didn't fall into a situation like Joseph Newgarden where he had to conserve fuel and start to get him passing. So NBC kept trying to hype up how much push to pass that Grosjean still had, and they were shocked that he wasn't using it down the stretch. Well, he couldn't use it because push to pass uses up more fuel, and Romain Grosjean was not in a position to do that, or else he may have lost his podium.
All right, I'm going to get to my number 3 here, and I think it's pretty obvious where I'm going. Let's talk about Juncos.
So let's break down the situation of what happened here. So Canapino's in the lead.
Yes.
Now,
and let's actually go back further.
Okay.
So Ilott had that tire issue very early in the race. So before all this happened, then Canapino didn't pit, right? And inherited the lead on a sequence of pit stops. Elio was a lap down. He was up there trying to get his lap back.
Which, granted, yes, he was in the lead, but he wasn't technically in the lead. He was going to have to pit eventually.
Yes. First Argentine driver, though, to lead laps in IndyCar.
Very nice.
Unfortunately, was the beginning of a bad chain of events for the team.
That wasn't he didn't lead by merit in the sense that he was passing a bunch of guys and it earned his spot. It was basically based on sequence and strategy. So
he's leading. Ilott came out of the pits. Apparently there was some issue in the pits, so it was a bit longer of a stop. The team didn't know, and there's a good explainer on motorsport.com, David Mulcher Lopez, with the article. Juncos didn't know that Ilott, that this would be happening. So Canapino leads, there's the restart. Ilott comes out of the pits. Everything's stacked up. Canapino gets into Kirkwood. Newgarden slingshots to the lead. And then Canapino eventually got caught up and Pato spinning.
Yeah.
So that was the whole sequence. Juncos went on to say, and it's a good read talking about what happened as far as in the moment. So Juncos is calling strategy for Canapino. Ilot's team didn't know that he was in the lead. In fact, there was even a microphone issue as far as in the helmet, as far as Canapino being able to come back. And so when you have an experienced crew on one car and then a new crew, new strategist, new engineer, new everything on Canapino's car, it's just one of those things where there's a failure to communicate, it triggered a chain reaction of events that ultimately, unfortunately, led to death threats for Ilot.
Yeah, which perversely, I guess you've made it if you're getting death threats on social media. But passionate fans out there, I guess, maybe too passionate. But this is an unfortunate situation for Juncos. I felt like they were in line to have another decent weekend, but things kind of fell apart from there. And Canapino really struggled for the weekend, as we knew he would at some point. Long Beach seemed to be that bugaboo for him. But unfortunate how that came across. But what happened after the race, magnifies it even more, unfortunately.
Juncos said they didn't know Elio was a lap down.
I mean, is Juncos just not completely not paying attention on Sunday? They don't know whether they're sending their driver out. They don't know Canapino's in the lead. They don't know Elio's a lap down. Like, what were they doing?
Yeah, there's just a confluence of mistakes made.
And I think that's the major issue.
That weren't the driver issues.
Yeah, I think that's the major issue. Communication within the team and knowing what situation you're in and other drivers are in the race. It seems like normal stuff that needs to happen.
They didn't think Callum was going to come out in front of Augustine in that situation. They didn't know Elio was a lapped out. Look, there are so many mistakes made in this situation that the teammates get along. I don't think that was really thought to be an issue going into it, but it's just, these are the mistakes that smaller teams make, right? Not getting these things right. And Callum Ilott, who we thought had a long-term deal, apparently came out over the weekend. Well, really, it's just for 2023 as far as his deal with Juncos. Wouldn't shock me if he found his way to another team if he can put together a good season overall and go somewhere else.
If he has a good season, he could go. I think he's been very solid for Juncos, so we'll have to see.
So that whole situation just seems like there are things that could have been avoided, and the team let down the drivers, and this only became a big problem because apparently some Argentine broadcaster tweeted something about it, and then Ilott just said, like, hey, you have a responsibility here, to not be this way. And then the team sent out, a statement. Canapino sent out a video. The series had a video. All of that created a chain reaction.
I felt like maybe the reaction, I know you need to protect your drivers and all that stuff, but was it made more of a deal because of the attention brought to the online threat? I just didn't feel like it was more than a couple people of that. I mean, there was one major person that has a lot of followers, right?
Yes. And that guy has like over 100,000 followers and like a motorsports broadcaster, I think, for Argentina. And so that made this go a lot further than it ever should have gone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate for sure, but hey, they need to take that passion for their Argentinian driver, which we saw at the exhibition down there, and channel it into something good, like showing up for hopefully the inevitable race down there.
Does that still happen? Like, does this create a rift?
No, it doesn't.
You don't think so?
No, why? No, this is being. I think this is all being made way too much. There's a couple of idiots, but there's always idiots on social media. I just feel like maybe IndyCar is magnifying this thing, not purposefully, but they're in uncharted territory with this happening. Whereas most sport like this, you have idiots all the time putting stuff on social media about other sports. I don't know. I don't think this is a big deal.
Juncos did tell Nathan Brown in the Indy Star before the race weekend, in an article that came out, internal issues that make it complicated, talking about an international race. So they're in the process to understand what it will take to make it happen. once we know that, we'll find out how we can do that. So
probably one of them is IndyCar not really wanting to go to Argentina for a points paying race, which makes no sense to me. Very
dumb to me as well. If that's the holdup,
we'll get to that later.
Why would you?
Yeah.
We'll talk more about the schedule on that. But what's your final takeaway?
Can we talk about it? Was I felt like maybe a double whammy for Alexander Rossi this weekend because I picked him to win. He started 7th. He was in range, he started 11th. And not only does he not finish the race, but then watches the guy that took over his car win the race. And we talk about guys that haven't been able to close, and Rossi throws away a decent finish by getting into the tires on the final lap and finishes 22nd. I just felt like maybe it was when we talked about Alexander Rossi moving on and Kyle Kirkwood being the dude that was stepping into that seat is who won this battle. Well, we talked so much about McLaren winning that because they get Alexander Rossi, an Indy 500 winner. And we saw Rossi, of course, end that losing streak last year. But I think we glossed over Kyle Kirkwood. And I don't think we can make an argument after 1 week, but for 1 week only, it looked like Andretti had won that switch, right? Because Rossi couldn't finish and Kirkwood drives that car into victory lane.
Rossi had a suspension failure. That's what he said on Twitter as far as why he crashed. So that would explain why he just dove into the tires.
Yeah, dove into the tires.
Where it was looking like a solid top 10 finish.
Yeah, for sure. But
it's an interesting question because I think it was clear that it was time for Rossi to move on from Andretti, right? And there were reports that he even tried to come back for 2023, but this is going back a couple years that Michael had already signed Kirkwood as far as that, and they had to wait a year just based on the seat availability because of Herta not going to F1 like they expected.
Right.
So that pushed things back 1 year. But I think this will be a race-by-race thing to watch. Do I think Rossi's going to beat Kirkwood in the standings by the end of the season? Yes, of course. Like I don't think that's asking a lot, but I think what it comes down to is what happens in the month of May. Like, does Rossi put together a good race? Does he win the race? I mean, look, you expect McLaren to be fast. Andretti, I feel like, is a question mark based on the drivers they have. They have talented guys, but how are they on ovals?
Yeah.
Outside of Herta, they're unproven at best.
Definitely. So I just thought it was an interesting dichotomy with that car winning the race, or that driver taking over for Rossi, and then Rossi struggling to finish, regardless of on him or the team. So that was my third take of the race, and once again, beautiful locale, Long Beach. It never doesn't disappoint. Very impressive, and congratulations, Kyle Kirkwood, getting that win, number 1 in the series.
Other notes from the weekend, shout out to Santino Ferrucci, finishing in 11th for the Foyt team. You know, something that we didn't talk about, but big teams dominated this weekend. I mean, you look at the top 10, Andretti, Ganassi, Penske. You have McLaren, then you have Ganassi, Penske. So, I mean, the old school big three dominated the top 10 in this event. You know, Rosenquist's the only outsider, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we didn't see other teams break through. Like we saw Juncos break through, you know, first couple weekends of the season, or even the Rahal team had some decent results.
And did they? I mean, I guess based on where they were, but...
Oh, I'm not talking about Long Beach. I'm just saying they were able to move up.
Gotcha.
But like Graham Rahal was 12th. That was the lead guy. There are no outsiders. Even McLaren was not really represented at the front of the field this weekend, just showing that the old school big three dominated. And I thought that was something I noticed toward the end of the race. Like, where's the storylines beyond the big teams? There just weren't any outside Ferrucci.
I mean, you look at Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan finishing 12th, 13th, 14th, and I guess that's a improvement. Is that what we're judging Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan on? Is getting into the high teens, and that's good for them?
I'll be curious to see how the month of May goes for that team.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a major shakeup is coming within that team, because that's. I
would agree.
I don't know what else you're supposed to do.
Meanwhile, some good news as far as attendance goes. Reserve tickets were sold out as of Saturday night. They had some general admission tickets still available, but it was the most attended Sunday for the event, according to Jim McCallion.
Ever?
The presidency, yeah, a new high for the event, 89,000 people on Sunday. Now, the overall weekend attendance was the highest since 2008 when IndyCar, and it was the Champ Car farewell race.
Right.
But the highest in the, so to speak, modern era.
I guess it's tough. Does he mean
the split?
Does he mean the reunification? Does he mean car? I mean, it doesn't mean Formula One, I'd imagine, right?
I don't think so. But as far as the Sunday, I would guess it's the attendance record for the 2008 onward. Is my guess.
I would imagine. But let's just say it was a great crowd.
Yes.
Who knows where it ranks in the pantheon of Long Beach, but it was a very good crowd.
And overall for the weekend, 192,000 fans. Look, you never know what to believe with promoters, right? They're going to tell you something good. And that was also the highest since 2008 as well. But either way, it's a
successful event.
Yes.
IndyCar needs as many successful events as possible.
Correct. Other note from Chad 200, only 12 drivers have won Long Beach and the Indy 500 as far as winning both in the same year. Happened in 94 with Alan Sir Jr., 2001 with Elio Castroneves. So Kyle Kirkwood could join a very exclusive list if he were to win. And speaking of Kyle Kirkwood, he was plus 2,600 odds to win. And like his biggest fan, I couldn't believe this bet, but like over $1,200 down.
Wow. On a plus 2,600?
Yeah. Won like over $25,000, which is insane.
Pretty impressive. But that's a lot of money to put on a driver. How many times has he done that and lost?
Yeah, right. That's really what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Moving forward as far as what that means. So those are some other notes on the weekend. I don't think there's really anything else online. Oh, TV rating, of course.
Yeah, we got to talk TV
favorite
rating.
topic. So 1.026 million viewers, so they got over 1 million.
Always a key in my mind.
Down from 1.055 million, so both races on NBC. However, head-to-head against NASCAR, head-to-head against NBA playoffs, and a lot better than Texas, so that's a positive. And then you get to the digital side, second most watched Long Beach, only behind last year's, so that's positive. And then 50,000 fans watching digitally across the race. So
that's a whole lot of people paying for Peacock.
Yeah. Which, as we say, $5 a month.
Yeah.
That's a lot better than the, $30 a month that you could listen to the races via like a phone call for the IndyCar radio in the 90s. So
you couldn't watch the races live. So it puts things in perspective a little bit.
Absolutely. So that's a recap of Long Beach. So decent TV numbers, great crowd, really no complaints for all that. And hopefully this will build some momentum. We'll see. I mean, the Texas race, did that build momentum on the TV side? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
all these things were, unless you're getting a big bump, it's really hard to tell. But as far as the on-track product, 253 on-track passes, most since the Modern Series started racing here and began recording such things in 2009.
Yeah.
So it was a good race, especially for Long Beach where you're not expecting a lot of passing.
Yeah, I thought it was very, very successful event all around.
If you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free to subscribe. You'll never miss an episode or special announcements. You can also check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers for sale in the store. You can follow us on social media, IndyCar Podcast, the handle on Twitter and Instagram. On Facebook, just search for New Track Record. Our email, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier, Rob, Stitch, and several others for your support. As little as $1 a month if you want to be a supporter for us. And as always, you can listen to us for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon Music, Podbean, what have you. Again, all for free. Mailbag time, and obviously we have plenty to dive into this week after a busy week in IndyCar. So we'll start things off Thanks to Hunter's Way 67, giving us some nice pictures and views from over the weekend. Also able to be a part of the 100 Days to Indy premiere. So he kind of had the inside perspective for us, our boots on the ground for the weekend.
Our roving correspondent.
Yes. A lot of people upset about Pato Award and that situation, but we'll just dive right into rate the race and plenty of entries on that one. How would you rate? You gave it you gave it a 7.53927.
Yeah, and I'll round down to a 7.5. I thought it was a solid race. It's always great to be in Long Beach. The fans turn out in droves. Relatively clean race. Just lacked a lot of drama. Good to have a first time winner, but overall, throw everything together, I gave it a 7.5.
I'll give it a 7.
Wow, I rated a race higher than you. Wow.
Yeah. I thought it was good. There just wasn't a whole lot of intrigue.
No, I agree.
Beyond like the start and the first 25 laps.
It sounds like a F1 race.
First time winner. That's always fun. You had an on-track pass for the lead. Great event. Looking at rate the race from our listeners, Jeff Cerneski gave it a 7.5. First time winner, close finish. Good battle with Newgarden for a while. Playing spades, 7.5 out of 10. Solid race. Not much more to say and ask for. SCTJ9, 7. Good, mostly clean race, just not much passing or excitement. Daniel SEM 2004, 7.5. Solid race overall, just needed a close battle at the end. No massive drama, no total carnage. Lack of coverage on the on-track action made it seem worse than it was. Listen to the IndyCar radio coverage, you can get a much better picture of how others were doing. That's true. Look, the broadcast is always going to focus at the front.
Right.
It's just the reality.
Totally.
Big D Kart, solid 7. Many past LBGPs, hard to say, were snoozers. It's true. Momo haters, 7.5, maybe 8. Good, interesting race. Great to see a first-time winner run a flawless race, but don't like fuel mileage. No complaints. I thought, you know what? One thing NBC does, they always lock into talking about fuel mileage way too early in the race. And I thought that early caution was going to help eliminate that. Unfortunately, it did not.
No, it did. And it set a lot of things up for the rest of the race. But we can say at least now we are at one race without a through the field. And we'll see if we can continue that.
Well, no, Texas, they didn't do one either.
Did really? So there are 2 races?
I think so.
Wow.
Maybe they're not doing that anymore.
No, they did it in St. Pete at least. I remember they did it through the field because I messaged you because that's what I always do. One of the things I send you is what lap the through the field makes it. So yeah, if we're at 2 races now without a through the field, I think that says that's the biggest gauge of entertainment factor. If they're delving into the through the field at some point during the race, they're trying to fill time.
Yes. Left _brigade, green flag dropping with only a first few rows lineup was frustrating. Not sure how that can be fixed without waving off the flag, though. Pit cycles were fun. That restart on lap 22 was mental. Whole day was full of sloppy driving, but didn't make it any less exciting. Okay, I think that's the first time we've had an entry without an actual rating. But all valid points. P. Gaynor 14 gave it a 7.5. M. Russo-Marov, I apologize for butchering that, gave it a 10. Bill Hessa, a 7, first-time winner, close racing. They all can't be like the first 2 races. Interesting how many drivers are playing the long game for the championship. Makes for an awesome end to the season.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know the championship. I've even, because I watched everything on recording, DVR, or on Peacock delay because I was busy all weekend with work, would purposely fast forward any discussion about the championship.
I try to not look at it on the screen.
Right, me too. Like if it came
I know
up,
who's leading just from reading articles, right? But I don't really know anything beyond.
And it's twofold. I don't want to know, and I don't want to hear people talk about it so tremendously early.
Considering, I remember a couple of years ago when Newgarden crashed at Barber, and they're like, "Oh, this is bad for the championship." It was the
first race. It was 2020.
It's race 1.
Yeah, remember?
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Jamin T14. I'll go with a 7. Much of that is a venue, how good Long Beach looks on TV. Racing the field was good, and then had you waiting to see if Kirkwood would make a mistake.
That's what I was waiting for. Or a caution.
Yeah. I was waiting for something. We just never got it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think I would have given it an 8. NK Harden gave it a 7. Few exciting moments, but mostly quiet up front. Kirkwood was clearly the class of the field, and when he was up front, he wasn't going to be touched. DeGuerra, 6. Solid race with a new winner. First stint was the most uneventful of the season so far. Interesting to see so many championship contenders struggle. I mean, if you're locked into the championship this early, go for it.
Yeah.
Piotr Shevchenko gave it an 8. It was a competently done street race with a deserving first-time winner. I'll ding IndyCar again for the fact that 20 cars didn't line up for the start. It's equivalent to a 2016 field doing a single file start. Yeah, that's continues to be a problem.
Can we talk too about the curbing a little bit, which you haven't talked about yet, and how that screwed over Callum Ilott and at least one more driver about, and we never did we ever get the explanation? Was it the track that didn't inform the series not informing the drivers? I don't know, but that was obviously a communications breakdown, and maybe it was Junko's fault because they struggle with communications all weekend. But in all reality, it derailed Junko's, or at least Callum Ilott's weekend for a fair amount, because he just launched off that curbing, and you just can't have that. You can't have an addition, because these guys are muscle memory, and how they go around a track the day before, the lap before, is what they're going to do again.
Yeah, it's not like they do a walkthrough and point out this stuff usually the night before practice, when everyone is there and has set everything up, and they do the track walk and kind of see what's different. So you can't just make a change overnight and not tell everyone.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And I never did get and maybe it's out there here, a full explanation on, I know why. It was because of the IMSA race before, and they took it out and then didn't have time to put it back for the first practice session for IndyCar. But was that a track error in communication? Was it a series error in communication? I never understood, because I do think Callum Ilott has a point that he shouldn't technically pay for that damage.
No.
He didn't know the curbing was there, or at least that one particular curb.
I am analog, gave it a 7, decent race, nothing overly spectacular, at least outside of the few minutes of pit lane chaos. Hunter's Way 67, our boots on the ground, 7 for the race, absolute 10 for the weekend. Got hooked up with pit lane and paddock passes, plus won a pace car ride and an Acura NSX. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Saw a bunch of drivers, owners, and series officials out and about Friday and Saturday nights. So it sounds like he had a blast. Tyler_Allen gave it a 6.5. Meanwhile, Transdocean Trojan, I'm going 8, because nothing wrong with a good strategy race. Love to see Andretti actually outwit the Penske guys on fuel and tires for once.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a great point. Jeremy from HBG, I go 7.25 just to be difficult. Not as difficult as you.
Yes, correct.
Beans B-Card Blog gave it a 3, quite boring. And D Bishop 1987, as someone who was there, 5, wasn't as fun as last year. Interesting. So a mixed bag as far as people in attendance and what they thought about the race weekend. So that's a look at Rate the Race. Elsewhere on the mailbag, I think we had a couple other entries. This talking about Peacock. Okay, so the Peacock numbers, as we mentioned, 50,000 fans watching digitally across the race. Look, those numbers are only going to go up, right?
Right.
I tweeted interesting numbers for the I don't want to pay for Peacock crowd. SCTJ9, that I don't get. They cover so much content, have a library of replays of everything, so much for so little. Thompson 419, the anti-Peacock contingent makes absolutely no sense to me. Someone else pointing about, and look, I did the same deal. Black Friday, Peacock for $1 a month.
Yeah.
So like there are options available to you out there. If you want to complain, it's just because you like complaining.
I'll complain about something with Peacock.
Yeah.
So the weekend I was busy and I was working both Saturday and Sunday, but I was up. I had some opportunities to have some sessions on where I was at. But I can't. So if a session has already started, I can't go back to the beginning of that session.
Yes.
Live.
Like live. Yeah.
Yes. And then it takes like 2 hours to get the replay up. So session 1 happened at what, 6 o'clock? Let's talk session 2. So practice 2 started about midday our time, right, on Saturday.
Yes.
And I had some time, and I was probably like 20, 25 minutes into practice, but I was stuck. I didn't want to tune in right there. I couldn't rewind, and I had to wait 2 hours for it to post. So in that respect, I was kind of frustrated. I wish you had an opportunity to turn on something live and then pull it back to the beginning and restart it from the beginning, even though it's still technically live.
And I get it that people complain that if you're watching on Peacock, there's no side-by-side. But here's the thing. You can buy an antenna for like $15-$20 and watch on NBC.
Yeah.
That's what I do for most races. So
right. I also fast forward through side-by-side.
If I'm going back and
I'll
rewatching,
find out
I do
what
the same
goes
thing.
on as soon as if you're watching it recording, you'll find out what happened during the break.
As Marty Reed used to say, you saw it there during side by side.
That is true. He did say that. So, but I mean, it's a minor quibble for me for Peacock, and more people are going to be going there. More and more people are going to stream. It's happening, folks.
That wraps up the mailbag. Time for news and notes, and we have plenty to get into this week. First off, we think the Indy 500 field is set, so Able Motorsports will run RC Enerson.
Will they?
We don't know if they will show up at the test. They'll have a Chevy engine, if so, but that is the 34th entry.
Now, it's interesting to me that there's still only, Nathan Brown is reporting this? Who's reporting it? Racer hasn't.
Racer had this story before. Now, as far as are they showing up at the open test, is that what you're asking me? Or
Well, I don't know if it's a confirmed, basically, and you looked at the mailbag and read between the lines, is I don't think Marshall Pruitt is convinced that it's going to be a 34th entry. I think they're still efforting to do it. I think they've announced it, but that doesn't mean they're going to do it. And I think there's still a lot of question marks, and we'll see if they're at the open test the next 2 days. And with 34 entries, and Marshall Pruitt made the point, like, if you're not at the open test, you may as well just not try, because you're already going to be behind the 8 ball, and now you're putting yourself further behind. It would take a Herculean effort to not be the 34th.
Pruitt said in the mailbag at racer.com, I heard a formal announcement. It was imminent last week and the week before. They have an engine from Chevy, so they don't show up for the open test Thursday, Friday. No need to turn up in May. So be a lost cause and going up against 33 Indy 500 veteran entries. Yeah, that's the thing, right? They have everything they need. They have the car, the chassis, the engine. If they're not at the open test, which we're recording this again the day before, and I haven't seen an entry list come out, they will be behind the 8 ball. And Trackside Online, announced, and Pruitt had a story before this that they were, closing in on the deal, but Trackside Online had the story on Friday that this was basically confirmed. But if they don't show up for the open test, don't bother.
Yeah, don't show. And that's what Marshall Pruitt's thing. He said in his mailbag, well, I heard this was going to be announced last week. I heard it was going to be announced the week before. It's still not formally announced, and the open test starts tomorrow. So do the math. And it's a team that I feel like is already kind of cobbled together and not ready for the 500 for the big stage. And if they miss the next 2 days, especially tomorrow, which is going to be beautiful, it's going to be like 80 degrees down in Indy and nice. If you're not running, then what's the point to try to make this race with such a shoestring budget?
Meanwhile, Arrow McLaren has revealed all of their Indy 500 entries. So Tony Kanaan announced today, Wednesday, they showed off his livery, the Smart Stop self-storage car, black and orange, pretty standard. But then the livery reveal for the 3 full-time cars was quite something at Long
tremendous.
Beach. Just awesome cars. You have Felix Rosenqvist, that represents Alain Prost 1984 Monaco F1 winner. It looks like a Penske Marlboro car, of the 90s and 2000s. You have the Pato Award car that pays homage to McLaren's 95 Le Mans winner, all black, kind of a metallic black. Pato Award, really cool. And then Rossi's represents Johnny Rutherford's 1974 Indy 500 winner. All these cars look great. Way better than last year.
Yeah, I would agree.
Way better.
Very nice and great presentation too by McLaren as well. And really, really sharp looking cars. And the best thing is they're all got papaya in them, but they're easily distinguishable between each other.
Yeah, last year was tougher and they just had all those weird colors thrown in.
Yes. And you're like, well, if you look at the front end plates, one has orange and one has no, it shouldn't be this hard, right?
Correct. Also, Zach Brown had an interview over the weekend, sat down, Nathan Brown, a good story talking about the future of the team. So they are still looking at 4 full-time cars in 2024. We've been told essentially Alex Blow coming over, and then whether they decide to keep Felix Rosenqvist, that's up in the air.
That was kind of a throwaway line from Townsend Bell. I believe it was Townsend Bell over the weekend. One of the practice sessions said he had talked to Felix Rosenqvist, and Felix told him that he still feels like there's an opportunity to fill a 4th car, a seat with the team next year. And for for a while we've said, well, McLaren's not going to go to the 4. Hell, they just went to 3, right? But I think there's a scenario where if Felix can prove himself over the rest of the season that they could run 4 full time next year. And that opens the question up then, do they run a 5th?
Well, they have to because they have Kyle Larson.
That's true. They're already locked in, right, for a 5th. So
if they do 4.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
And the other thing that Nathan Brown had, so they had broke ground in Whitestown. They had announced that they were going to build a shop in Whitestown, which, okay, that's fine, normal, as far as a new shop. But that project hasn't really taken off. That was announced last May. And instead, because they haven't broken ground on that nearly a year later, they're in talks with Andretti Autosport about taking over that shop once Andretti moves into their new facilities in 2025 in Fishers.
That would be very nice.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Other notes, Scott Dixon will officially join the Motorsports Hall of Fame as part of the 2024 class. Also joins Jimmy Johnson on that list, so congrats to Dixon.
What is that, combined between them two? Jimmy has 6 titles or 7 titles?
7.
7 titles and what? 5 titles?
Dixon, I think, has, 2003, 8, 13, 15, 20.
There's one more, 20. He has 5, doesn't he?
Yeah. Wow. I'm missing a year. I know I'm missing a year because I know he has 6, right? He has
6? I thought he had 5. Yeah, I'm wrong. But anyway, 12 titles, 13 titles between the two? Pretty amazing.
So let's see. 2003, 2008, 2013, because it's every 5 years. And then 2015 he won. Oh, 2018. That's the one I'm forgetting.
Okay.
So
he's got 6.
6.
Yeah, 7 plus 6 is 13.
Yeah,
impressive.
Pretty good list of drivers. And the fact that they're on the same team for a bit was even more impressive. So Dixon added to that list. All right, 100 Days to Indy schedule. Again, that's coming out next week. Episodes 1 through 5 on Thursday nights on the CW, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Finale June 8th, 2 weeks after the second to last episode. So it'd be, that's just because they won't have enough time, after the Indy 500. So that's an update on the schedule there. In fact, speaking of the 500, they're putting up the Indy 500 logo on the JW Marriott in downtown Indy. Scott Dixon, part of that the other day. Meanwhile, as far as IndyCar and future events, let's have some fun here.
Yes.
So first off, we've heard reports about this, but once again, another story. Adam Stern, Sports Business Journal, IndyCar eyes return to the Milwaukee Mile. It's not a surprise. He tweeted that out the other week or so ago. NASCAR back with the Craftsman Truck Series. They're doing renovations to the facility. IndyCar in deep discussions about bringing the series back as soon as 2024. In fact, there are talks for a race in 2023 that didn't come together. So, again, that's the update there. Not a big surprise. And then, meanwhile, future tracks on the schedule. So, this from Auto Week. Mark Miles had a lot of interesting things to say. Maybe not particular tracks, but particular markets. I think that's the takeaway we can have from this article. They're looking to add at least one more race, the current 17-race schedule.
That would be Milwaukee, then. I think Milwaukee's gets you to 18 for 2024.
Yes. So do you cut the road course race, the second road course race at Indy? Is that a possibility? That's not mentioned in the article. However, Miles did say that they're looking for at least one more race in North America to be added to the current schedule. Didn't reveal the market. Possibilities mentioned. Some of these are, I had no idea these were in play. Vancouver, for example, Denver, Las Vegas, a street race. Returns to Milwaukee, Chicago, Phoenix, or New England, and a potential street race in the New York, New Jersey market, and perhaps even Salt Lake City area. So remember we threw out Salt Lake City a while ago?
Yeah.
And we thought Miller Motorsports Park, but
I think some of these ideas are old too, like the New York one. We haven't heard of that in years. Phoenix, like they already tried Phoenix.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why that's on the list.
I had no idea Vancouver was even a possibility. New England, so what does that mean? Does that mean Pocono? Does that mean Watkins Glen? Like, what does it mean?
I would think Watkins
In Chicago, is that Chicagoland or is that IndyCar taking over the street race?
No, this is going to be a one and done thing with Cup, guarantee you, and they're not going to want to do that
I would think so.
ever again. I thought the one thing that jumped out to me too in that article was up to 4 cities had reached out to IndyCar about hosting an IndyCar event in Mexico.
Yes. So including Mexico City and Monterrey, which those are kind of the primary places. Fundadora Park in Monterrey, where they used to race back in the day. And then Mexico City, I assume, would be at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, where Champ Cars raced before. Right. And then obviously F1 races there. Look, you got to get a race in Mexico, and you got to do it within the next 2 years.
Like, you take advantage of the Pato Award craze. We saw it at Texas. We saw it even over the weekend still at Long Beach. Like, he's your most popular driver in the Americas, and you need to take advantage of it before he goes to Formula One. Eventually, he's going to Formula One, and if you don't take advantage of it now, you're missing a prime opportunity to market one of your stars who is highly likable in Mexico. That Mexico loves their native athletes that shine, and IndyCar has one in Pato Award, and they're not taking full advantage of it right now. And if there's interest, if there's really 3-4 cities that are reaching out to IndyCar and say, we want to race, like, you need to lock up one. You need to figure out how to make at least one happen.
Yeah, and ideally for next year. I don't know if that's going to happen, but you would think they've been having these discussions for several years.
Yeah, you would hope so.
And so you're getting closer. As far as the schedule, the racing calendar likely remain from early to mid-March to early to mid-September, no later. That's not really a surprise, that just due to NFL and even college football and talking about the ratings and everything there with that. And date equity also important as IndyCar. I didn't realize this. IndyCar's not added or dropped a race since 2019 when it dropped Pocono. So they've had a lot of date equity.
Consistency is nice.
Yes.
But I think you want to add to with some of your... The easy thing is...
South America would be an exhibition event. That's the other thing.
Which makes no sense. Like, we were talking about that. Like, if you're going to make the time and effort to go to Argentina, like, why not make it a points race? I don't understand.
I would agree. I don't understand
I want somebody to ask that question. Like, why is it just an exhibition race? Because it would naturally fit in between, if you look at this year's schedule, St. Pete and Texas. You could go to Argentina and have the second race of the year there. I don't understand why it has to be an exhibition, but that's me. I guess unless you're going in November or December, but I don't know.
It makes too much sense to me to do it and to have it that way. I don't get why you're not going to fill, like, you got to fill that gap, right?
And as much as I marginalize the championship and how we don't talk about it before the 500 or blah, 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 what's the point if you're not scoring points? I know, somebody's going to win and blah, 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 but I'm like, what's the hook? Because every race means part of the championship, but that one doesn't. It's just kind of odd.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, tweets of the week time, and just one tweet. Annie Agar, who is a big deal in the NFL world. Yeah. She was at Long Beach, got a 2-seater ride. She tweeted out a video of her taking that 2-seater ride, saying, "This is how Tyreek Hill feels all the time, isn't it? Never felt faster. IndyCar, thanks so much for having me out. Unreal experience."
Tyreek Hill retweeted it,
yep.
Trying to shoot his shot with her as well, it seemed like.
Yeah.
And then she owned him. Did you see the response about... oh, God, I can't remember what she said.
Yeah, she took him down. It was
something about
really funny.
A kid owning him at his camp or something like that.
In a race at his camp.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's for people who aren't in America, who aren't football fans, they have no idea who this is. It's a very big deal.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of followers on social media. I don't even know what her actual job is. She's with Valley Sports, I guess.
Oh,
she covers NFL and college football, but she does a lot of videos, a lot of traction.
She's like an
influencer,
I guess you could say.
I guess,
maybe
yeah.
A social media influencer that does stuff about the NFL.
Very big deal, though, for IndyCar to get something like that done and kind of promote some buzz for the series. All right, random split error driver of the week time.
All right, random split error driver of the week. We're going to the 99-2000 seasons. This guy had 8 career starts in the Indy Racing League. From Jackson, Michigan, Mr. Ronnie John Cox. You heard of Ronnie John Cox?
Yes, I think because I knew about so Jackson, Michigan is like the
Yeah,
the biggest town closest to where my wife grew up.
Correct.
So
8 races over the course of 2 years. He raced for TriStar Motorsports in 99 and then Bird McCormack Racing, in 2000. That 2000 season, he appeared in 2 races at Phoenix and Vegas, I think. Yes. And then did not qualify for Indy, did not start at Texas, and that was the end for him. His best finish of his career, 11th at Texas in 1999 with TriStar Motorsports. Tried to qualify for the 500 in both 99 and 2000. Couldn't in either year. And this is an interesting thing because we rarely see this. Is in 2002 and 2003, he then went down to the Indy Pro Series. So that's basically going from the IndyCar Series to the series formerly known as Indy Lights. He raced 10 times in that series with a pole, 3 top 5 finishes, and 8 top 5s. His last professional race, the 2003 Freedom 100 at IMS. And he now apparently owns and operates Technique Inc., which is a prototype metal stamping and laser cutting company based in Jackson, Michigan.
So I've actually driven by, not the exact road it's off of, but on I-94, it's a little bit off the interstate, off I-94. Near the airport there, I've actually driven by where this business is located. So
now you can stop in and...
Not sure what I could do at a metal fabricator, but...
I don't know, you can stop in and have some conversations like, hey, you are our random split arrow driver of the week.
So the Jackson Airport's right by where his business is, and also where Penske would fly in to do tests at MIS back in the day. In fact, that's mentioned in the book Beast. So
yeah,
there you go.
Which you say you like to read around this time of the year.
Yeah, I do. So I need to start that soon because I'm reading a rapid response that I borrowed from you, and I'm about a third of the way in.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's an easy read, quick read, reasonably. It's big text, short chapters. It's a good read if you haven't read it. Absolutely.
All right. Well, next week we have a special guest. Plus, we'll recap the Indy 500 Open Test at IMS going on this week, and it'll be leading into the first episode of 100 Days to Indy. Wow, a lot going on as we're right on the cusp of the month of May.
Yeah. Can't wait.
That's coming up next week on the show. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. Thanks for joining us once again on New Track Record Podcast.
Podcasts by Federated Media.